check. So there's a couple things that I want to do to pick up first, and then we'll jump back into perspective in just a second. But I just wanted to. Well, Marguerite, that's actually pretty awesome. What do you think? No, so now I actually do. So now do another tunnel layer that's big, and do a whole big area with one brush. And again, you're not painting with black and white, you're using skin color to do this, right? Okay, because that's what happens if you use black and white, it starts to desaturate where you're changing the tone.
Should I like make the saturation higher when I do the large? Or is it just, it's like kind of gray?
You could, you still need to be light though.
Okay.
So I wanted to show you guys a couple things really quickly, so I'm going to take a break out of really fast perspective, and then we'll come right back to it. There's one last thing we need to do with it, but as long, I have no idea why I'm doing it out of order, just to mix things up. So can I get everybody to just build a brand new file for me? So simply come up to your file menu, down to new or Command N. You should get this new file dialog box. Again, it should look like this because we're using the legacy dialog box. 8 by 10 inches is great, 300 ppi is perfect, and simply say OK to that. And so with this going on right now, I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to come over to my drop-down menu, and I'm going to make it a completely hard brush. I'm going to click again on the name Adobe to get that flat menu to go away. Normal blending mode, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I want black to be your foreground color. So we're simply going to paint strokes of black on this white background. And so if we come over to the top and we simply just kick out like this, and you can see we've got strokes that are coming out. And this is exactly what you would expect to have happen on this, that there's no real change in this. It starts completely full and it ends completely full, and basically the tip ends up being rounded. But to deal with some of the issues that we were talking about earlier today, for people who want to actually paint hair, or for people who want to paint eyelashes, or who want to do that kind of stuff, since you are working with a tablet, you can actually do that because you can add pressure to your tablets. To do that, we need to change how the brush actually works. Now, if we have time, it won't happen today, but at some point before this class is over, it may be our very final class, I'm going to show you how to get into really serious brush customization, but I'm going to give you just a really quick shot at it right now. So to get to this, come up to the window menu, come down to brush settings. A dialog box will open up, this screen will open up. You want to make sure you're on the brush settings, not on the brushes. Then you want to check shape dynamics, and you want to click on shape dynamics, because if you're out of this and you simply click on shape dynamics, you don't get to actually adjust anything in it. So you need to check it and to click on it as well. I'm going to get rid of scattering. And then in what they call size jitter. What jitter means is randomness. And it means, so in this case, we can actually change the control that is now by default should be off. Click on this drop-down menu and come down to pen pressure. And you will see a preview of what happens to your brush. So if you start with a light pressure, your size is very small. The heavier you press, the bigger your size gets, and then as you taper off. So if we leave this on like this, I'm going to just put this over to the side, and now I'm going to come back into my image and do the same thing, and I'm just going to do quick strokes when what I'm trying to do is start with a light pressure, make it a heavier pressure, and then end with a soft pressure again. And you can actually see at no point did I even press down hard enough to get as thick or as heavy as this brush actually is. So you can actually get really good at this. I'm going to drop my pen size down even more. I'm going to take it down to like a 30 and then just do little small hits like this. And this would be a way that you could actually build in eyelashes, eyebrows, you can do hair, all that kind of stuff like that. Again, this is a pure black, and that's not what you would really probably want to use. If you were going to do this to try to fill in somebody's eyelashes, you would actually do a sample of the color of a real eyelash so that you can paint that part in. But this will actually help you. The thing you need to remember about, though, is this is sticky. So if you've actually got this set up now, and you don't want, we're going to go back to working on our regular images, and you don't want this to be turned on from that, you've got to come back in here and turn this pen pressure off again. And so again, you'll see the preview down here of what that means your brush is now going to look like. To get rid of the brush palette altogether, simply click on the little X that's in the top. And then when you come back, you'll see that your brush works exactly the way it started. So I just wanted you guys to know that part. So I'm going to click, everybody good on that? I'm going to click close out of this. So for all you film scanners, we're actually now going to look at Genie Scan. So everybody got a copy of that, right? She was gracious enough to lend that to us. All right, so here. So it's just called Genie Scan. If you can just copy it over, you can probably just open it from the hard drive if you want. So I'm going to show you basically how I would go after this. Jenny may wholeheartedly disagree with the results of this, and that's fine. She has that prerogative. But at least it'll give you guys some exposure to how I think and maybe possibly, anyway, we'll see. So you need to find that. For me, I need to find it as well. Sarah, really quick, you need to copy Genie Scan off of this. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Genie Scan. And so this is a scan of a, it was a negative, right, Jenny? Yeah, because I've actually turned it into back into a negative. So this is basically what most of you guys would start with right here. This is a 16-bit scan. So again, it's a 3F scan that's coming off of one of the Imicons in there. And by choosing to actually do it in 3F, it has no, nothing has been done to it. You're getting actually the raw scan off the sensor, which is what we want to do. So everything is in here. Sadly, it's a little bit on the flat side, but that's kind of the way 3F actually works. So Carson, this would actually be the sort of same process that we're going. In your case, it would be a positive, but it's still going to be rather flat on that because it's scanning the whole dynamic range that the scanner can do, which is deeper than what the film itself can actually do. Let me make sure I'm recording this. Yeah, okay. So the way we're going to start out with this guy, I'm going to reset my workspace. Okay, so this is how I would start out with this guy to begin with. The first thing I would do would be copy it. So simply copy this so that it actually flips here so that we've actually got a copy that we can work on and not worry about destroying. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to crop this out because some of the information that I'm going to get on this is not, I don't want the, there's a black edge around this, and I don't want the black edge around this to confuse me or to confuse the situation. So I am going to crop this, but I'm going to do a non-destructive crop on this. So to do that, I don't know how you guys work, but sometimes the crop tool works really well. Sometimes it's a little frustrating for me. So one of the simpler way to actually do a crop is to simply use the marquee tool. So if you hit the M key for the marquee tool and simply come up here and click and start to drag out, remember, once you drag out, if you hold down the space bar, you can move this tool around, which will allow you to actually get it up closer to this edge. So then I'm simply going to continue over to the other side, and you want to avoid that little clear bit of film strip that's at the very end. So once you've got the marquee done pretty much the way you want this to be done, you then click on the crop tool and you'll see that the crop tool automatically snaps to this. Then if you look up in your options palette up here, you can also see that there's a check mark right next to delete crop pixels. You want to uncheck that. That will maintain all of her uncropped pixels so that at least we can get through this to develop the curves that we want to develop or the work that we want to develop on this guy. Does that make sense to everyone? So then simply hit the your return key, whatever. You'll get the crop preview, hit the return again, and this image will now be cropped. If you actually want, oh, there's another thing. We need to do this really quickly, guys. This is a 16-bit scan, which again is what you would want coming off of it, but that's going to cause everybody's machine here to go really, really slow. So I'm going to ask you really quickly, just for our demo purposes, to change this. Come up to your image menu, down to mode, and change this to an 8-bit per channel image. We don't really need the 16-bit now that we've actually got this part. Not that it's wrong. I would probably do all the converting first, but this is going to be pretty taxing depending on the kind of computer that you've got. So this is our beginning. This is sort of the cleaner version of all that. So my first move is simply hit Command-I to invert it, because again, it's a negative. Now, one of the problems that we've got here is you see that there's this huge amount of cyan, and there's the cyan in here. The reason it exists is that there's the orange that's actually on the film scan. We need to combat that. Why is that film orange? Say what? Yeah, well, because it's a negative film, but all negative film is orange. Why? Because they just thought orange was kind of a cool color. Because they thought, well, let's just make this as challenging as we possibly can for people who are trying to fix this stuff. So here, this is why it's orange. It's called an anti-halation coating, and this matters a lot for people who shoot film. Not that you can buy film without it, but nonetheless. So if you imagine that this is your lens right here, and this is your camera, and here's your piece of film right in here. And so there's a metal back plate right here that actually presses your film against the body of the camera to hold it flat and to also keep it in the plane of focus. And so light comes in here and actually hits this film and exposes it, right? Without an anti-halation coating, what happens is that light continues through the film, it hits this back plate, and it bounces right back into your film and exposes it a second time. And everything that you have in there will be fogged. So they put that orange coating on it. That orange coating kills this light. So this part doesn't happen. That's what it's for. But you end up with this. So to fix this, we are going to put a curve on here. So again, simply add a regular curve on top of this guy. Here's the curve sitting on the top, and we are going to do, and in my case, you can try the auto thing, and even though, again, that we've got auto set to find, or in my case, if we look at auto options, it's actually set to find the light and the dark parts, and you can sort of see what it does here. I don't think this actually brings in enough contrast for this image. It does do the color reasonably well, or at least it's a kind of a good start, but I think we can do better than this. So I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to simply do it by hand the way I showed you guys already once today. So come up to your red channel, and then again, I'm going to hover down here over the shadow point slider. I'm going to hold down the option key. I'm going to click on this. My entire image goes red, and I start to drag up till I start to see something just start to come through the red. So you can see shadows on the far left-hand side of my image are just beginning to appear. So that is the setting my black point for the red channel. I'm going to still hold down my option key and click on the white point and pull it back till I just start to see some red start to break through. And so in this case, I'm just beginning to see it's breaking through. It's just the very back of those. These very back guys of these of the flamingos down there. I get a little nervous about the highlight part of this, so I'm going to back this off slightly. I was at a 194 input. I'm going to go back out to a 98, back out to, I'm going to leave it at a 201. If you want the same numbers I've got, I ended up with a 101 on the input and a 203 on the output. Then I'm going to drop down my green channel. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Hold down the option key, click on this point, and bring it in until I just start to see some tear through. It's probably going to come in that same exact shadow place that's back on the back side, and it is. So right there, I'm at a 154 if you want the same as me. I'm going to click on the white point slider and come back to this direction again. And again, I'm just beginning to pick up stuff at about a 220. And then finally, I'm going to go to the blue channel and do the exact same thing. I'm going to crank, again, I'm holding down the option key to get that blue field so I can start to just see shadow appearing. I'm at a 182 for that. Come back with my white point slider. The blues are always hardest to see. So I'm just picking up blues at like a 227. This seems to me to be a much better version of this image, but I'm not finished yet. But are you guys at least got something that's looking reasonably close to this? Okay, so here's the next trick. I need to select all of these layers. So hold down, the top curve is already selected here. I don't want to lose any of this information. I need to be able to go back in time if something has gone wrong. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the bottom layer. So all three of these have been highlighted. The bottom one, which is the virgin, this guy right here, the inverted one, and then my curve is on here. I'm going to then come up to my layer menu, come down to Smart Object, and convert this to a Smart Object. Now I've actually got all of that information is sitting inside this Smart Object. If you wanted to get to it, you would simply, again, if you're using tabs, you'll see that this ends up being another tab. But if I double click on this, it will actually bring out an entire second image that is uncropped. Again, all that cropping is actually still there, so nothing's being cropped. All of that information is still there. The correct curve is on here. The inverted version and the virgin is all still in there. So I've got all of that information is safe sitting inside of my Smart Object. So I'm not going to use the crop tool for this. However, because this is now a Smart Object, I can actually use a smart filter on this. So I'm going to come up to the filter menu and I'm going to come down to camera raw filter and I'm going to see what this actually helps me do or doesn't help me do. Sometimes this will be more destructive, sometimes not so. But if I come in and take a look at this image, I see an enormous amount of noise that's actually in this garbage can right down here. And I'm not convinced that this thing has actually been truly color balanced. It's not bad. I mean, my green looks like pretty green, whatever. But to make sure, I'm actually looking in here, and it looks like these things that are on top, I have no idea what they are, but I'm going to guess on here, they're plastic pipes, they're something, but my guess is that this should be a neutral color. So to find out, I'm going to click on my white balance tool, and I'm going to come over. I'm not going to try to get in the deep shadow in this, but I'm also not going to go to that highlight at the top. That highlight is too light and burned out. I'm just going to hit something right in the middle, and I'm going to click on that, and to me, that actually makes this image feel a better color. If you want to see the before and after of this, it's the little double-headed arrow that sits right down. It's in the middle of the very bottom of this. This will allow you to click to your before and after, and when I look at what's happening I'm not looking at the flamingos because I have really no idea what they are, but when I look at this tree stump that's there and I look at this garbage can, those seem to me to be more the color that they would actually be. So I'm going to zoom back out in this, and I'm feeling like this was actually a reasonably good start for me. However, I'm going to see what Photoshop thinks should be happening with all my exposure. And the reason auto works here in a really good fashion is that it's a deeper control than you get in just with a curve, because in this, it can independently control highlight recovery, shadow recovery, whites and blacks, all that kind of stuff. I'm simply going to click on auto and see what it does for me. And you see it actually makes my image, in my case, it made it a little bit darker. It's recovering some of the highlights. Now, I can say, okay, I know that what it's doing here, all this work that it's doing with its highlight recovery and its contrast and all these moves in here, they are all designed to bring out as much separation and tone as you can get to give you as much detail as you can have. Does that make sense? However, I think overall it makes the image look too dark. So for me, I'm going to simply grab the exposure slider and crank it back up to where it was in the beginning, to that sort of like 0, 0, whatever. I'm going to leave the rest because the rest is actually recovering highlights. It's separating tones of contrast. It's actually dealing pretty well for me in this whole regard. And I'm feeling pretty good about that part. Does that make sense, everyone? So then I need to go after the noise. I'm going to zoom into this garbage can because this is where I really spot it. And the next place I'm going to go to is the little, the two pyramid looking things, whatever. If you click on this, this is where you can actually do color reduction, noise reduction. So if we really zoom into this guy, you'll see that right off the bat I have two kinds of noises. I've got color noise, that's why this thing looks all rainbowy, and I've also got noise, luminance noise, which is why it looks so grainy. So I'm going to grab the color first, and I'm going to click on the color, and I'm going to start to drag it forward, and you need to drag and stop and let this redraw. There's... We okay?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Okay. I'm going to hit it again a little bit harder. I hit it again a little bit harder. And at this stage of the game, I'm really beginning to get rid of the color noise. So I am roughly around a 37 or 40. The other noise that I'm still seeing in here is luminance noise. It's not, this doesn't have that rainbow color to it. To see what I'm talking about, again, go down to that little double-headed arrow down at the bottom, and you can click this on and off, and you can see that in this case, I've actually removed a good part of the noise. Now, I don't know what damage this has done to the flamingos. We're going to see in just a second. I'm going to come up to my luminance noise here, and you can't completely eliminate this because this is film, but I would certainly like to suppress it a little bit, or at least bring it down just a touch. So again, I'm going to hit this a little bit harder. And at this stage of the game, I don't really want to be any more aggressive than this. I'm roughly at a 42. Again, you can actually go back and forth between these two and see what it's done. It's taking care of the noise of the garbage can, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Jenny didn't take this picture because of the garbage can. So I'm going to come in and look at the flamingos and see what this did to them. So again, I'm going to go back and forth on that, and I'm feeling like in many ways this is an overall improvement of that. If Jenny looked at this and said, you know, I really think that that's too smooth, you've actually made, there's no real oomph that's actually happening in the flamingos, I'm going to see if I can recover some of that back in the basic panel. So I'm going to go back to the basic panel, and I'm going to come down to the bottom down here, and I'm going to grab the clarity slider, and I'm going to drag it up. And the clarity slider starts to reduce some mid-tone contrast for me. It starts to bring back some of the graininess of the film, but it also starts to sharpen the edges that noise reduction actually stepped all over. So I'm coming up, but I don't want to be too aggressive about this. And then again, I'm going to take this on and off and on and off. And I'm feeling like that's actually going in a pretty good direction. So I'm going to zip back out and take a look at the entire guy. And this is what I would end up with. So Jenny, what do you think? No, be honest. You can say no, because everybody has their own opinion about this. You could say, oh my God, I hate that. I wanted it to be nowhere near that saturated, and it shouldn't be that sharp, or it should be softer, or I really love the noise. Or I mean, that's all fine. You won't hurt my feelings. Believe me.
For me, it's too saturated and too yellow.
Too saturated and too yellow?
Like, because of the lens.
Okay.
The screen is like different though, I think.
Oh,
Like,
well, that can actually be happening. How's it look on your screen? Better or worse? Yeah, it doesn't have quite as much yellow in it. Yeah, I don't think this projector has been calibrated ever. This is what it looks like on mine, but I think you'd probably think that's still a little too warm, right? But that doesn't mean we need to end there. So we're back here in the basic panel. The warmth is coming from your temperature slider. Simply grab your temperature slider and start to hover it back. And there goes the yellow. So just because these things are giving you a key or a start or a place to go, whatever, but I would actually argue that given where we started from in that color negative, this is actually pretty extraordinary. And again, it took us, 10 minutes to get there. Are we good on this? All right.
Can we pause for a moment?
Sure.
Or not a minute, but my computer's doing
Oh, yeah, I understood.
It's like this is done.
Oh, this is a whole restart for you. Yeah, I know. Sorry, but you're not saving this anyway. And actually, you're not saving the other perspective thing we're working on. So just restart really quick. And we're going to hope we don't have to reset your preferences. And if we do, just restart the whole computer. That's what I would do. Okay. So, and then there's one last thing that I would do while I was actually here, guys, at this stage of the game. If you come over to these little sort of arrows that sit at the top of your screen, these are actually show your shadow clipping warning and your highlight clipping warning. If you click this on, it's actually flagged stuff in blue, and you can see right down in here, in this area down in here, this is actually being flagged in blue. So that's telling me that that's actually going to black. So I'm okay with that part. And if you click on the other one, it actually shows up red. And in this case, we don't have any red in here. So we have recovered all of the burned out highlight in the detail that would actually be on the backs of these guys. So you can see there's a little bit of red that's happening on that one top guy right there. Again, if I turn this off, but that tells me that this has actually been placed, those white points, extremely well. So that's what I would do. All right, you can cancel out of that. You don't need to save that. You can close that guy up. You don't need to save it. You can actually close up the perspective one that we've actually gone through. You don't need to save that. There is another file that is in our class 10 folders. Again, in perspective, and it's this ONY, Owen Stock Joseph, _Joseph. I need everybody to open that guy for me really quick. Joe was a student of mine before who actually had done a composite, and this is actually the assignment that's coming up for you guys from today. So your assignment that's coming out of today is to, I've given you the figures. You have two different figures you can choose from. You can use one figure, both figures, one or the other figure, it doesn't matter. That part is up to you for your composites. However, you are to actually take a figure and put it into a real background that you have shot. Now, you're welcome to go out and shoot a new background if you want to. So you can go out tomorrow and shoot a picture of Lollapalooza or the lake. It doesn't matter, whatever you've already got, a real background. However, you're also to create a synthetic background and do the exact same thing. And we are going to do synthetic background today, so you'll understand what it is I'm looking for, okay? But in this case, this is the way he actually did this thing. And the only reason I'm showing this to you right now is we need to decide if this image is in perspective. So again, first thing I'm going to do is actually hit the F key to simply get to the paste board, because I know I'm going to be working on the paste board. There's some guides around this guy that are only going to confuse me, so I want to get rid of these guides. So I'm going to come up to the View menu, and I'm going to come down to Clear Guides to get rid of all of that stuff. And then I'm going to ask you, is this image in perspective? Does this look right to you? So, can you tell me what's wrong about it? Okay, let's not think about the shadow and the lighting part right now. We're going to deal with that part today as well. So you think there's a mismatch in the lighting? Yeah, I would say that you're probably right on some level. It's fixable, but at least it's in the same direction. But perspective-wise, is this person in perspective?
I feel like she's too large for the background.
And what tells you that?
The horizontal lines from the back image.
Okay.
Like the posts of the building.
Okay. Is there a way we can find out? There it is. So, with your ruler showing, we need to actually mark where her feet are. So I'm actually going to take, I'm going to hit the F key again to go back to the black pasteboard one more time, because I need to be able to see my rulers. And I'm simply going to drag a line out so that I can so when I rework this, I can find out where her feet need to be. So this is the horizontal line, and then, the vertical line, and this is going to be the horizontal line. This gives me an indication of where her feet should actually go, or close enough. I am going to turn off the shadow that's actually back behind this guy, so we don't actually need that part. And then I'm actually going to try to put this into perspective. So there's a hue sat layer on here I don't care about, but it's the body that I do care about. So I'm going to temporarily turn this off. So the first thing that we need to do in this is that we need to find the horizon line. How can I do that? Pen tool. And what would you trace? Exactly, the concrete. It's not a lot to go on, but it's enough to go on. So I'm going to zip in here to the concrete part right here. Again, I'm going to hit the F key to go back to my paste board because I'm going to need that. I'm going to drag this guy all the way over to the side because my converging lines are going to be somewhere way out here. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. I'm going to click on this point right here. I'm going to drag this line out and then make sure and come out pretty far with it because we need to be out far enough to make sure that you do get your converging lines to cross. And I'm going to click that spot out there. Then I'm going to come back around. I'm going to come pretty low down here. I've got to come in so that I don't get confused about what's going on. And I'm going to click on this lower spot of concrete and then say what?
I have a pen tool problem.
And
Just draw a line out.
do you come up to your little gear at the top? Do you have the rubber band selected? Select it. Did that work?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, I actually now have my converging lines and they cross right here at this spot right here. So I'm going to click on my ruler and I'm going to drag it down to where those two guys connect and I've established my horizon line. Did that work for everyone? No, that's okay. So actually, zoom into that. Did those converge? Yeah, so that part is, yeah, that's fine. So where those two cross right there, it looks like you've actually come back. Let's do a new set of lines really quick. So go to the path. No, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we're going to start again. So click on your pen tool there. And you don't see it either. So click on your little drop down here. Turn on the rubber band. And now you'll see the line. And just drag it along. You need to go much further out. Yeah. Right, and just click. And then come all the way down. Don't try to come back again. Click. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You don't have to anywhere down there. You just come back to this corner. Click, and then go all the way out again, trying to trace that bottom line. And see where those two cross? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And you just click. Where those two cross is your horizon line. Click on your ruler. Don't worry about the pen tool. Click on your ruler, drag down to where those two cross one another. It's right there. Yep, right there. Perfect, let go. You can throw this path away now. You can throw your work path away. It's done everything. All we wanted to do was find the horizon line. So I'm going to click on my path. I'm going to get rid of this. So I now have the path actually at its horizon line. So I'm going to zip back out. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to turn the girl back on. Now, this is transforming. Transforming here is destructive, so we need to actually make this girl a smart object because I don't like the destruction. I'm also going to throw away that hue sat layer. That was a Joe art thing, so we don't really need that. But the body, because I'm going to be transforming back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, I don't want that to be destructive. And if I leave it as this pixel layer right now, it will be destructive. So my first move is to turn its eyeball back on. Make sure that the body is selected and come up to the layer palette down to Smart Objects and convert to Smart Object. You can see you've got the little weird icon that's down at the bottom telling you that this is now a Smart Object. And then I'm simply going to transform this guy. I'm going to make her much smaller. Command T. Again, I'm going to click on the link between width and height, and I'm just going to make her small because I need to set her back in space. I don't care how small right now. I'm just trying to guess, and I'm going to set her back here in the space that appears to be between those two columns. So this is I'm pushing her back into this area back in here, and I can look at this now, and there are visual clues for me about how tall this should be. So I'm going to ask you guys, this railing right here, where does that hit me? About my waist, right? So about 3/4, so it's going to run right there. That's where it should hit her too. So now we need to make her small enough in there to fit this visual cue. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to continue to make her smaller because she's way too big. And I'm going to take her down like this at about that scaling right there. And that seems about Yeah, actually, I'm going to bring her down a little bit more because this is only hitting right at her. So that seems closer. Doesn't it seem about right to you guys? Again, what we're looking for here are known things. So, how tall is a car? Automobile. If I put my arm out, can I rest on the top of the car? Probably just about. That means I'm 6 feet tall. That means the car's about 4.5 feet tall. You could, again, anything that you could scale to that. We need something known to establish her size in this. Does that sort of make sense? We also need to know where she is in space, but she is in space right now, in this space between these guys, so she is scaled right for this. I'm close.
Yeah, she's bigger. I think she's bigger too.
You think she's, wait, yours is bigger or smaller?
No, I think that, yeah, she should be bigger.
Oh, you think she should be bigger? So think about this, think about it. You just said this to me, that this thing should be at her, like her waist.
Yeah, but she's probably, she's wearing heels. Probably
But
taller.
look at this, this is a railing that's sitting on top of a cement posty thing.
What is that? Cement supposed to be that big?
Well, I'm just adding it to this. So, would she be like this? No, that wouldn't make sense for the railing to be like that. Her hands would be up here. No?
I think you're probably
Yeah, I know. That's okay. All right, well, I'm going to leave it here. If you want the same scaling as I have, I put her at 30, basically 30. Here, I'll give you guys the benefit of the doubt. We'll do 40%. I'll make her a little bit bigger. I'll just change that to 40%. Happier there?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank God. So I'm just going to go ahead and say okay to that. I'm going to enter that transform, and that part will be fine. I'm going to reset her now. Again, I'm going to hit the V key to reset her so she really does look like she's standing in this spot between those two pieces right there. So in this case now, I feel like she is anchored and she is sized right and scaled right. So now I need to transform in perspective. I'm going to zoom back out to kick back out because I know she needs to come right here to this spot right here. So Command T to transform her. You need to actually grab, and interestingly enough, this anchor point right now was on the horizon line, and that just happened to be a fluke. That is coincident. So, yeah.
I accidentally created a duplicate state in my stream box. Do you know what that does?
I have no idea what that does.
I accidentally asked this. I was trying to go back.
And it doesn't let you go ahead in history, does it?
I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just like another tab.
It does look like you've actually got two going on now.
I'll just move this
Yeah. Okay.
one. Looks like I still have the stream box.
Okay, so just turn this into a smart object really quick because we can actually do it. So that's now a smart object, and your transform is fine. Set it back into the space. Again, I did a 40% reduction on that, and then float her back in there. Okay, so Command T to bring that up. You need to then, guys, you still need to grab that anchor point, even though ironically it ended up almost right on the horizon line. Now for sure we know it is. Then I'm going to back this off. I'm going to again hold down the Shift key and the Option key to transform her in perspective, and I'm going to drag to actually bring her out. And again, at this stage of the game, you can actually, I want her to come, instead of coming towards the left, I want her to come more towards the right. So I'm going to shift my anchor point to the other side, still on the horizon line, and now I can bring her more towards the center. So again, Shift, Option, and kick her out to the point that her feet touch that bottom line, and go ahead and hit the return key. And again, she is now in perspective. She's scaled right and in perspective. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to simply drag her to the right so that she is back in the spot that she was before, and I'm going to do a history snapshot of this. And I'm simply going to call it number 1. I'm going to scroll up to the top and then see what the difference was. And you can see that indeed Connor was correct. She is way too tall. And that too tall, that's like by about 1.5 feet too tall. So unless she is 7'5", does that make sense, what just happened? Okay. So hit the F key again, F key one more time. We can get rid of this part. You do not need to save this part. Alrighty, guys. So let me find something in here really fast. Okay. Are there any more questions about perspective and what we're doing and how important this stuff is and the visual cues you can take from it? So I've actually done this before. How tall is a parking meter? You can look it up. You can Google it. How tall is a tire? You can Google it. How tall is a fire hydrant? That was a good one I did once. So you can actually find things in your images that are unknown height, and you can scale people according to that. So let's say a fire hydrant is exactly 2 feet tall. Then you know that 3 fire hydrants are 6 feet tall, and if you're shooting a picture of me, you can scale me exactly to 3 fire hydrants tall, and you would be fine. I would be scaled right. I mean, I'd be in perspective correct, but I would be scaled right. Does that sort of make sense? And it's the same thing. How tall is the doorway? How tall is that door? That's a 7.5-foot door. Most doors are. So again, if I'm standing in the doorway, does this look right? Of course it does. But what happens if my head was up here, or my head was just like right here? Well, yeah, if I'm a pro basketball player, that could easily happen, but I'm not. So you guys get where this is going, right? So all of this, the scaling issues, all of those things sort of matter. So we are going to go into talking about compositing right now and the challenges of compositing. So when you shoot a picture, an element of pictures, we're thinking about 2 different images now that I'm actually going to try to put together. And if I'm going to try to put something together, what are the things that actually make up a photograph that are going to have to match? If I've got 2 different images, I want to stick them together. What are the elements about making those photographs that have to be the same?
Shadows.
Let's start, sure, we can start with shadows. It's kind of an obscure place to start, but why not? What else? Could we do an extension of shadows and just call this lighting? I'm going to keep lighting. Are you okay with that? Because it's both. It's going to be highlights and shadows as well. So let's say lighting. What else? Perspective. Thank you. What else? Color. Absolutely. What else? Think about things about photography, things that you do with camera. Exposure. What else? Depth of field. Absolutely. What else? The next one's a little tricky. Resolution. If you take a picture of a background that's got with a giant res camera and it's got like a monster high resolution, and then you take a picture of a person with your phone and you try to put the 2 together, the resolutions don't match, and you'll actually be able to spot one has a grain that's 1,000 times bigger than the other one and it won't match. So this is where we're going to begin in this issue right here, and things that we're going to have to actually deal with in here. There may be other things that come up, but this is actually a good place for us to start. So we're going to talk about how you actually shoot images for a composite. So in order to do that, I am going to ask you guys to come down to you got and just make sure that this is the right files that I want. Yeah, it is. So I want you to come into our, so it's in week number 10. It's a thing called tree exercise. I want you to actually go inside of there. There's 2 CR2 files in there. If you can, actually there's more CR2 files, sorry. There's 2 at the bottom. There's this one called trees _13 and trees _19. You can open the XMP files if you have them, it doesn't matter. Just simply drag those guys both on top of Photoshop. So these are pictures that I actually did up in Wisconsin. This is a picture of my wife who turned 60 today. I know, right? Happy birthday. So at any rate, the thing that is important about this, and the first thing that you need to think about in doing your shooting for composites, if you're shooting something in the studio on green screen, which is a classic, you're shooting, typically that's where the person would be, right? And then you've got a background. Which of those do you shoot first?
Background.
Why?
Go back. So what's your face?
Say what?
What's your face?
It's my base?
Yeah.
There's got to be a better reason than that. I was going to say, I can adjust lighting in the studio, but how do I go out into the woods and adjust the lighting out there? Now, I can make things contrastier, I can fake it on some level, but in a larger scale scheme of things, whatever, if I've got something already shot in the studio that's established, and I need to find a match out in the real world, then that forces my hand. I can't do necessarily the scenes that I want to do, the vantage points that I want to do, because my lighting has to match. Whereas in the studio, I can do a side light, and then a top light, and then another side light. I can change that up relatively quickly. So you always want to start with your backgrounds. You always want to start with the part that's the most complex. So that's what I would actually do in this case. So, and I've got pictures of my wife that's out here for two reasons. One reason is that I don't have to worry about scale now because I've got the scale. This is a person. So if I put a person into this spot, my wife is 5'7", 5'8". She actually does not have heels on, so I've got a relative thing. The girl that I'm going to put in here is probably 5'10", is wearing heels, so I know she's going to have to be a little bit taller than this, but I've got a scale reference and I don't have to worry about that part at all. Does that sort of make sense to everybody? What else have I got going on in this picture? Two things. Three things, actually. Can you tell me what the lighting is in this picture?
Like what it's like.
Well, look at the lighting on her face. What do you think?
About noon, maybe?
It's overcast. It's over.
Yeah,
lighting
it's
is overhead.
light.
It probably could be noon, 1 o'clock. It's in the it's in the midday. Let's just call it midday, right? Heavy overcast type sky because there's very very little shadows. You do see a little bit shadow underneath or whatever, and you can actually pick it up by the shadow that's actually underneath her chin area right here. So, but it gives me an indication of my lighting. So now I've got. Oh, this is one that we left off of this was scale. Scale does become sort of part of perspective, but this ticks off lighting. This actually ticks off perspective. Does this tick off color?
Part of it.
Say what?
As the initial color would come in the background. Again.
Okay, so think about this. You've got an image of a person, or the woods that you're actually shooting pictures in is a really warm light, and the pictures that you shoot in the studio is a really cool light. How do you put those two together? It's not possible. So the trick to it is, so let's say, but everybody in here has got their own idea of the color that they want to end with. So people say to me, well, first, sir, I want my pictures to be really desaturated and cool, really cyanic and blue. The trick to it is you want to put the same things together and then push your entire composite desaturated in blue. You do not want to desaturate and make blue your pieces and then try to fit them together. So in this case, I want perfectly neutral color here, and in the studio, I want perfectly neutral color, because if I have those, then my color is also checked off the box. Then once the comp goes together and they're pieced and it becomes one image, I can make the whole thing warm, I can make the whole thing blue, I can make the whole thing desaturated, the whole thing red, whatever I want to do, but they went together and the colors match. Does that sort of make sense? So what else can I tell about this? What else is going on in here that will help me out? What's that tell me?
Your exposure.
Perfect exposure. So I can also balance exposure here. If I'm shooting this card between 245 and 250 and I do the same thing in the studio, isn't my exposure identical? Yes, it is. So I can check off exposure. What about depth of field? Of course, this puts my camera on this person to focus. So I've got depth of field is actually set. Resolution, as long as I shoot with the same camera, roughly the same size, I've got resolution taken care of and scale taken care of, all because I put a figure into this image that's actually got a color checker and a ring. Does this make sense to everyone? So we're going to use this really quickly. I'm actually going to color balance this. So up to the white balance tool, come down and click on the patch. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make sure I hit it. Click on the gray patch right here. It actually has been color balanced. Come up to the menu at the top, do a select all, the menu at the top again, and sync your settings, and go ahead and say OK to everything. Now, both of these images are actually the exact same balance, and I'm going to open both of them as smart objects. And you do want to open both of these at this stage of the game right now. So they've actually come in together. Almost. They've come in together, and I can actually then take the one with the figure, and I'm going to drag it on top of the regular woodsy one, hold down the shift key and let go, and it brings it in place. Now, the really astute people in this crowd will notice that there's a slight jump in that. If you actually turn off the eyeball now, you'll see there's movement in here. I don't need to really worry about that movement. If I did, I would do an auto-align of these layers. To do an auto-align, you cannot do it with smart objects. So we should look at what auto-align is, just so that you guys know. I'm going to close up the original version of the trees, because we don't need to say, again, we don't need that part, because I've got both of them sitting right here. So, yes. Sure. No, I'm just going to go through it all over again. And actually, I'm going to change this to regular. I'm not going to keep it as smart objects this time. But yeah. So again, I'm simply got both of them selected. I'm going to drag them both in on top of Photoshop. It'll bring them both into Camera Raw. I'm going to zoom into the girl. I'm going to click on my white balance tool and click on the gray patch right there to do the white balance. Are we good? Then I need to actually apply the settings that I've just established here to the image that doesn't have the girl in it. So to do that, you come up to the film strips drop-down menu and do select all. You'll see it puts a highlight around the second one as well. And then back up to the same one and come down to synchronize settings. And what that does is it brings up this menu and say, okay, I'm going to everything in this top image that is checked off right here, I'm going to apply to the bottom image. And the only thing we've really done is white balance. So we can just say fine at this. And now these two have the exact same settings. Are you good on that part? And then I don't want to open these as smart objects. If you have opened them as smart objects, don't worry, you can leave them open. We'll just rasterize them. But if I want to temporarily change this to simply open images, you hold down the shift key, and you can then open both of these as images. And the reason I'm not using the smart object part in this is that I'm not doing a lot of dodging and burning in this part. I'm not going to be doing any transforming of this background. And I want to show you guys auto-align layers, because that part's important. So again, I've got these two separate images right here. I need to actually bring both of those together. So I'm going to click on the girl. She's actually active right now. I'm going to come over to her, to the layer. You don't drag the girl onto this. It doesn't. Nothing will happen if you. Oh, actually, something does happen now. But in the old school ways, whatever. Again, select the girl, grab the layer, drag it on top of the other image, hold down the shift key, and let go. And they come in. At least the edges are in registration. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of the girl. So, Elisa, you back again? Are we good? Okay. To use auto-align layers, you cannot have this background layer locked, and it is locked right now. So, if you simply double-click on it, it will offer you to name it Layer 0, which is fine with me. I can go ahead and say Layer 0, and you'll notice that the lock is actually gone now. Now we can see if it'll auto-align. The presence of the girl in the middle may kill this auto-alignment, but we'll see. If you hold down the Shift key and select them both, so now I've unlocked my bottom layer. I've got both of these selected. Come up to your Edit menu, down to Auto-Align Layers, and let go. And a dialog box will open up and say, how do you want to do this? And in 999,000.90, whatever cases, you're going to leave it on auto. And simply say, OK. And it'll let you know whether it could do it or not. And in this case, it actually did it. So now when I actually turn this thing off, the girl simply disappears.
Wait, so if your layers are a smart object,
It will not happen. Again, this is a destructive move. Smart objects are preventing that. Oh, so no, but wait, Henry, I didn't tell you guys how to do that. So let me go back and show you what it is it looks like you have. I'm just going to do it again, just so you see. Sorry. because I don't want to confuse you about smart objects, so I want this to be exactly the same experience that you guys have got. Okay, so I'm dragging both of these into Camera Raw. They've both come up. Again, I'm going to come in tight here to do white balance on this. Click. It is white balanced. Up to the drop-down menu. Select all. Back to the drop-down menu. Sync settings. Go ahead and say OK as long as white balance is checked. That's the only thing I've changed. Go ahead and open both of these as objects. But now when I actually copy one over to the other, so again, I'm going to drag the girl on top of the other one. Hold down the Shift key and let go. And you can see just by doing that, the background shifted. I'm going to get rid of the lone image of the girl. I don't need to save that. So now I've got both of these layers. And if I turn this top layer off, you see the girl disappears because she's not in the second frame, but also the image shifts. I can't have that happen. So to get rid of these, in order to do that, again, you can't auto-align these layers because this is a destructive move. And it may let us do it, but it will change. They will no longer be smart objects. So we'll try it. I'm going to select both of these guys, come up to the Edit menu, and you will see auto-align is grayed out. You can't do it because that is a destructive move. So come over to the tree layer number 1 and up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects and down to Rasterize. That's no longer a smart object, it's no longer protected, and it's no longer my raw data. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the trees that's below it, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize, and that 2 now is no longer a smart object. Hold down the Shift key to select both of them, and now Auto Align under the Edit menu will be available to me, and go ahead and click on Auto and say OK. And now if I turn off the girl, you can see that the registration actually has happened. What you'll also notice here, though, is that I've actually got transparent pixels up at the top. If you want to fix that, go back in history before you actually did the auto align. Make sure that both of your layers are still selected. Come up to the Edit menu, down to Auto Align, and this time you need to add, oh, it's not giving me. In other versions of this, it'll actually give you a way to fill transparent pixels, and it's basically just a content aware. So in this case, they don't give it to us here, and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to go ahead and say okay to this. And now I've actually got the girl and the background are in registration. Does that sort of make sense, everyone? Everybody good on this part? Okay, part number 2. Go back to that same folder. In that same folder, there is Engelhard or an ENG 120. Again, it's a picture of a girl in green screen in a studio, and then there's another one. So it's frame 001 and frame 0047, although there's 2 of those. So not the PSD, but the CR2. It's the 2 that are on green screen, and bring both of those into Photoshop as well. Again, you'll come right into Camera Raw. And so at this stage of the game, I can do the very same trick. I'm going to zoom in here. Now again, the white patches that I actually had involved in all of this gave me the same exposure. So I can check off exposure again. The color balance on this, even though there's glare on this card, the glare on this card still, those neutral patches up at the top are still neutral, even though the card has got glare on it. So I can still use this to color balance, and I'm gonna. So again, I'm gonna click on color balance right here. I'm gonna come down here and click on the red, on the gray patch right next to the red. Do the very same trick we've done before. Select all. Everybody is actually selected now. Sync settings. So I can actually sync my settings right now. Again, this is going to a custom subset, and I have no idea why. So I'm just gonna go up to the top and do everything and say okay. And then the only one of these I need to open is the girl by herself without the color card. This is the only one that needs to be open. I don't need the color card of the girl. I just need the girl. Wow, that sounds prophetic. And I'm going to simply say open object. And this will actually go ahead and open the object. I'm going to come up to the Photoshop menu and I'm going to say I want to hide all the others. And again, I'm going to do this very same trick again. I'm going to take this smart object layer and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it on top of the image of the girl in the woods. I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to let go and bring her into that. So now I've actually got all 3 layers that I need in one shot right here. I'm going to close up the lone image of the girl. I don't need to save that. It's done all its work. And so now at this stage of the game, what I have in my image is I've got the girl on green screen on top. If I turn it off, you can see the girl underneath. If I turn her off, you see the woods that I'm going to try to put the green screen girl into. Does that all make sense to everyone? All right, to scale the girl and position her correctly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the Smart Object girl at the very top. I'm going to drop the opacity of this down in about half, and then I'm going to zoom into this guy. I'm actually going to go to my pasteboard as well. So I want to actually see this part. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm really just going to drag her to the side. The first thing I'm going to try to do is just get her scaled right. So you can see just by the look of it, if I get her feet together or close together, then her head, she's clearly way shorter. In this case, this girl would be 5'1". No, she'd be 4'11". So I need to make her bigger. Does that make sense, everyone? So to do that, again, this is a smart object, so transforming on this is non-destructive. Hit Command-T to actually do our do our scaling. And then again, I'm going to click on the link between width and height, and then I can use the scrubby slider up here for height to actually click and drag this, and it will bring the girl up or down. The problem with this is, and it's not impossible to do, but the problem that I run into this is that she scales in proportion, so she gets larger all the way around, and so her feet are no longer at the same level as the girl in the woods' feet are. So to just make this faster and easier, tear off the reference anchor point right here and simply put it down at her feet. This will anchor this part of the image, and it will allow the transform to then happen around it. So you'll see her feet don't move, but her head will grow. So again, hovering over the height marker or the width marker, it doesn't matter. They both do the same thing. And start to scale up, and you can actually see her feet are roughly in about the same spot. But now I'm going to take her head slightly higher and then drag her whole body down just a touch. And you can actually see, again, I know that my wife is 5'8". This girl is a little bit taller than that, so I'm actually going to bump this up just a fraction more. And that feels about right to me. What do you guys think? Seems about right? So I ended up scaling her up to 120%, but she actually seems to be correct for me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK for that. And then I can actually drag the opacity slider all the way back open. And I'm going to temporarily turn this off. Everything in here has happened now. It's all been done. So I have my lighting is going to be the same. My perspective is the same. My color is the same. My exposure is the same. We'll see about depth of field. The resolution is the same because they were the exact same camera, and I've just set the scale is the same. So far things are going well. I don't need this girl in the trees anymore. You can throw that away. All I'm going to do now is work with this figure on this background. Does that make sense to everyone? So they are now matching. Are we good on this part? Okay. I think I've already done this to save time. I'm hoping I've already done this. So if you, let's see, maybe not. And now that's going to be more confusing than help. Let me see one other. Nope. All right, so we're going to do a quick knockout. You guys ready? Okay. It's not like we haven't done enough of these already. Okay, so for me, I'm actually going to use zero selective color. So again, do you all have that action yet or not?
Are you looking for a knocked out figure?
Yeah. Is there,
Already have-
oh, thank God, because I just didn't want to take the time to do it. Oh, so it's this one right here. Yeah, go ahead and open that one up. So again, we're looking for the 0047 knockout PSD. So simply double click on that. And then we'll scale this to the girl that's already on there because she's been scaled right. So again, I'm going to hide the others. I'm going to take a look at this version of this image right here, and you can see it's a regular version of the image, and it's got a mask on it, but it does have the knockout, so that part's actually great. However, I want to bring so I'm going to bring all of this over into this layer right over in here. So I'm going to click and drag this over. So I'm dragging the knocked out version of this onto my tree and the one that's got the green background on it, holding down the shift key and letting go, and it should bring this in perspective. In my case, it brought it in perspective, but it also brought it in underneath the girl that's actually, because I had my trees were actually selected. So I'm simply going to click and drag her up to the top. And again, I'm going to simply rescale this. So I'm going to drop my opacity slightly on this layer and then simply move her up here into this. And it looks like she's already been scaled once, and she's almost identical to the other one. So I'm feeling good about this. Everything is good to go here. I'm going to bring the opacity all the way back up, and I'm going to throw away the original girl on green that I had actually brought in. And this is the image that I've got so far. Everybody good on this one? Okay. So we need to then talk about a couple of things that are going on in here. If we zoom in here really closely and look, you can actually see that we've got that dreaded green thing that's around her arm. So I've got 2 o'clock right now. We've got a couple hours. We might be able to get through this part. How are everybody in this class? How are we all feeling about choking and spreading? Should we go over that again? Yes, we'll go over that again. Okay, so here's the problem. If you take a look at this girl's hair, the mask is actually in pretty good shape. The mask is pretty good. She's got hair back here that I don't want to get rid of. It's green and it's got spill in it. I definitely need to fix that part. But the rest of it seems to be okay right here. But I've got this line, this green line that's going around her entire body. You can see it's like this green glow that's happening all the way around her. Now, to fix that, it is a destructive move, and this is the only virgin copy that I have of this girl in here. And I don't want to destroy this virgin copy in case something goes wrong. So I'm going to duplicate this entire layer by simply dragging it down to the little dog-eared guy. I've now got 2 copies of this. I'm going to turn off the eyeball of the one that's underneath. This is going to be my virgin. I'm going to actually save this one. I don't want to screw around with this guy. As a matter of fact, you could even, if you wanted to, you could drag your trees above this to make sure that this thing just stays down, out of the way, and it's safe. Does that make sense to everyone? So then I am going to work on the smart object one that's right here, but the move I'm going to make now is destructive, and I can't do it on a smart object, so you've got to rasterize the smart object. So with this top layer selected, come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and down to rasterize. And you will see that little icon goes away, so we can now do spill removal on this image. At this stage of the game, I am going to go over to my history palette, and I'm going to click on color on my little snapshot. And the snapshot that comes up, I'm going to name this pre-choke. And say, okay, because I need a version of history wherein the choke has not happened. So because the choke is going, it'll fix the body, but it will ruin the hair, and I can use that pre-choke history state that I just made to return the hair to this state. So I've got the best of both. So then I'm going to go ahead and choke this image. So I'm going to hold down my option key really quickly so you can see what's going on. This is what my mask looks like. And again, the way choking works is, right now I go from black to white with very, very, very few shades of gray in between here. But if I blur this image, I introduce greater number of shades of gray, a bigger area of a gray transition. And then I can use levels to push those grays either towards the black, in which case that would be a spread. It would be making my mask larger. Or I can use the levels to actually take those grays and make them white, in which case it will actually draw the exterior into the mask, which is choking the mask. So the first move I'm going to make is to actually blur the mask. So make sure you're on the mask itself. And we're on this layer, so make sure the mask is actually active. Come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I eyeball this thing. I'm actually looking at a radius of 3 pixels right now. I want to see what 2 looks like. I think 2 is too small. We really need shades of gray to pull this off. So I'm going to go back to 3. That seems pretty good to me. If we go ahead and do this choke and it's not enough, go back in history, and then try a blur of 4. And if that's not enough, go back in history, try a blur of 5, and you get where this is all going, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. If we look out on my image right here, I'm going to undo that and then redo it. You'll see this is what it looks like. It actually makes the problem worse, and that's exactly what we want. So has everybody got the blurry edge now that's where you can actually see now more green? Good. So make sure that the image is not selected. Make sure that your mask is selected and hit Command L. It brings up the levels dialog box. And again, what we're going to try to do here is we are going to, and you'll see this is my histogram. I've got a lot of black and I got a lot of white and I have very few shades in between. If you grab your white point slider and start to pull back, again, what you'll see is happening is I'm actually doing a spread. I am pushing my mask further out, and I fully see now the green background that I was trying to get rid of. That's telling you you're going in the wrong direction. So drag your white slider, point slider all the way back, and instead grab your black point and start to pull it in. And you can see that it's actually drawing your mask in. This is actually choking. Now, I don't want to look at her hair, but I do want to look at the quality of this mask. And you look up right at her shoulder right up in here, and you can see that there's still a softness in there that probably shouldn't be in there. I got rid of the green, but I've still got a really pretty too soft of an edge in there. It's simply a contrast move. Now you can grab the white point and you can actually start to pull the white point back to sharpen up that edge, and you can actually see. So it's a sort of a dance between these two. Pulling that white edge back definitely sharpened it up, but it brought back just a hint of that green. So I'm actually going to hit that in just a little bit tighter right there. And at this stage of the game, I've removed the choke, but I've choked the mask, but I've actually got a reasonably good image. Is this working for everyone? Who is this not working for? All right, say okay to that. And then immediately over to your history palette and click on your snapshot right here and call it post choke, meaning after. And say okay. So now if we zoom back out just a little bit and we take a look at what happened, you can see that it destroyed all of that hair. All of that hair, there's a lot of it. There was really fine feathery hair. All of that part's gone. There's other areas that have also been damaged just as badly. So we're going to try to fix that right now. So in order to bring back the hair that was actually back there, you want to scroll to the top of your history palette, and you will see that those history states that we just made are right here. The one that's called Trees 019 was simply opening the image. But I've got a pre-choke and I've got a post-choke. You do not want to select either one of these history states. If you do, it will take you back in time. It will undo all the work that we've done, and you won't be able to work with anything else. All we're looking to do is use the little box on the left-hand side to actually click on to use the history brush. Now you'll notice when I clicked on that, I did not pick this history layer. You do not want to pick the history layer, or this is not going to work for you. So again, with just the little icon of the history brush stuck in next to this pre-choke, you can then pick your history brush, which is actually right underneath the clone stamp tool. I'm going to click on the history brush. And then again, I'm going to check my the quality of my brush here. I like to leave something about in the middle. It gives me a little bit more control. I don't know you need to worry about spraying, because I'm going to have a problem when I try to pull the choke off in these areas that get right next to her, where her hair is actually meeting the coat. So at any rate, I'm going to leave it at about in the middle part right there. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then I'm going to zoom into this area right over here, and I'm simply going to start to brush this all back in. And you can see I'm bringing back in all the fine, feathery, again, there's still spill in it. I'm not arguing with any of that. We got to get rid of the spill, but I'm bringing the true quality of the edge of that figure back in here. I'm going to do the same thing on her face. No, I'm not. I'm going to Command Z to undo that on her face, or if you came down on her face and you realized that, oh, that was a bad move, that you really wanted that edge of her face choked, you could go back in history, or you could scroll up to the top of your history palette, put that history brush icon next to post choke, This is now going to paint with the image as it was once it was choked. I just made my brush a little bit smaller so that I can just hit this area right here to actually finish that part. So now I'm going to take a look around the rest of this image. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and take a look and see if I feel like there's anything horribly wrong. Actually did a pretty good job on that guy right there. I still have a little spill on the glove and that kind of stuff, but it's doing a pretty good job on the legs. It's doing a pretty good job down there. That part's, again, I've got spill that's on all of that. You can see spill that's happening on the zipper and all of this. All of these things we can actually remove. And we'll actually start with the foot right down here. I'm not going to remove all of the spill on this. I'm just going to do one boot so you understand that part, but then we need to move on. All right, so still working on this image right here. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to change the blending mode of my brush from normal down to color, and I can't select color. Why not? Because I'm on the mask. Exactly right. Make sure you're on the image to remove the spill. So I'm now on the image, and now drop my brush down to color. Again, I still like that medium softness brush on this. So I was using history brush before. This brush for me is completely hard. So again, I'm going to drop it down to the mid 50s in here. Color is my blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Make my brush a little bit larger. I'm going to sample the color of the boot simply by holding down the Option key and clicking. That actually sets my foreground color as that sort of gray boot. And then simply go along this to remove that color spill. There's some that's on the bottom side here and the back. There's definitely some on the back edge right here. There's some on the zipper. And then I could actually run straight up her leg because it's actually the very same color. And you can see I'll remove all of that. You can see on the other side too if I come back down. So basically, spill removal 101, you guys already know how to do this. If you want to look at her hair really fast, just because we should, it's the most obvious of the spill areas right here. We're going to fix it the exact same way. Hold down your Option key to sample the color of her hair, and then simply work to get this spill out. Resample as you get to this lighter hair out here because it is actually lighter. In this case, because it's this feathery hair, whatever, I'm actually going to take my brush all the way soft so it completely sprays in. So it's a more gentle transition. I'm going to resample again. Bring in some of this. If you feel like this red is too intense, if it's too strong, you can actually sample something that's got a little less red, like this area that's right up in here, and drop your opacity to do a sort of a mix of color. So that'll sort of give me a mix in there. So if you ever feel like something got done too strongly, you can use that trick. But again, I'm going to come back up to 100% opacity right now and finish this work along the rest of her hair. Again, I don't really believe that part, but I just continually am changing the color of my brush. Again, I don't like this sort of like, I'm not really happy with that color, so I'm simply going to sample another color to bring that part in, and that part ends up working pretty good for me. So at this stage of the game, I would save your work, although this is not your homework, so you don't need to worry about this. Now, when I first did this image, I had actually taken this image, put it up on screen, and actually used those sandbags to mimic these rocks. So this girl should actually fit on these rocks a little bit better, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So if, again, we're on this image right here, you can actually take the V key to get the move tool, and if we come in to take a look at her feet, my idea, I think, was to have this heel right here drop right behind this little point right here. So I'm going to grab this girl right here, and I'm going to bring her over, and I'm going to drop her back down there, and I think that's what I had going, although I maybe had this part going instead. Nope, I'm going to bring her back up here. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay, so double click on the hand to take a look at this. So, do you believe this comp? Why not? She's just floating there. She's just sitting up there, right? Big as life, and there's nothing to believe about this, right? And so what's the thing that's really missing from all of this? Say what? Puppet warp. I could puppet warp this. That's actually a really good call when you think about this. If I wanted to puppet warp this, again, I would actually have to remove this mask from that image, would I? Again, I need her as a puppet. Right? But I've told you guys all along, you cannot remove this mask. You can't remove this mask from this image. I've told you that, right? So, keep that mask intact and still have her end up being puppet warpable? I can. So to do this, we actually select this image right here. In the old days, if you were to come up and do layer down to smart object and convert to smart object, what would end up happening is exactly this. This has now taken that layer, it's put it into an envelope. However, that mask is still intact. If I double click on the smart object, it opens up that layer and you can see the mask is right here. However, the problem that I've got with this scenario is it actually shrinks it sort of like crops the image, which can cause me problems later on down the line. So I don't want this part to happen. Now, I've never tried this before. I'm doing this in front of you guys for the first time. So if I'm successful in this, you need to cheer really loudly, and if I fail, you need to throw shit at me, preferably money and... I'm going to go back in history. I'm going to actually close this guy up. I'm going to go back in history to where we actually turned that into a smart object. And instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blank layer above this guy. So I'm going to click a layer above this, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this layer with brown. So I've got this brown that's sitting right here. It's my foreground color. It was my spill removal color. Option delete will actually fill that, and then I'm going to turn its eyeball off. So what I've done is I've created a layer that I'm hoping the smart object will respect, but I've got it turned off so I don't see it. Does that sort of make sense what's going on? So then let's try it. I'm going to hold, again, I'm going to click down on my the layer that I want to be a smart object, hold down the Shift key and click on the layer above it and come up and open this and up to layer and come down and say smart object, convert to smart object. It does the same thing. This is now puppet warpable. This girl is just by herself. If I hold down the option key and simply click on that, this is eminently puppet warpable. This is what I would want to puppet warp. And Connor, I think you're absolutely right. This would be a perfect thing to be able to adjust her feet and to move her feet so they really look like they were on the rocks, the whole 9 yards, right? So that would be a good move. Say what? I'm going to open it up right now and we'll find out what the problem is.
There's like a speck on the
Oh yeah, there's a speck right here on the mask. But we can fix that now because I've just double clicked on it to open it back up, and you can see that by adding that blank layer and adding that layer and turning its eyeball off, it keeps the entire dimensions of my smart object blown out the way I want it to be blown out, and that's a huge one for us. Make sense? If you need to fix the mask, the thing is that simply click on the mask. So I'm going to come over to the mask itself, hold down the option key and click on it, and you can see that spot right there. So simply take your brush, the B key, make it a little bit larger, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, hit the D key to default your colors to black and white, X key to make it black, and simply paint it in, and then close this image up. And wait, sorry, don't close it up before you go back to your image. And then close it up and save it. And that little dot will be gone. And then you can turn everybody else back on. Are we good on this? Okay, so for me, what's missing in this image and what's grounding this girl is, yes, again, puppet warping would probably help to actually move her around, but it's primarily there's no shadows to anchor her. That's why she looks fake. So I'm going to show you guys how to build shadows. Now, some of you, like Katie, who actually have experience in illustration, that kind of stuff, whatever, you may already have vast experience doing this, but I am here to tell you this, pure and simple. Shadows are the single most difficult thing there is in the world to do and to do well. And so we're going to talk about shadows. If we don't get to it today, it will be where we jump in on Friday. So I'm going to show you the cheap, down and dirty way, because it'll only take us 3 minutes to do it. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. I'll show you the infinitely better way of doing it, and then we will create an artificial background, and we will be done. Yes? Yeah, that's a problem. So, show what we got. And just do it again. Cancel. When you're trying to paint on that, or you're trying to do something on that, if you want to fix it, though, double click on it to bring it open into, so this is now a completely separate image. And you don't have that little dot. That little dot's fine. So if you were to change anything in here, you'd be fine. Exactly. So then just close this guy up, and you're good to go. Again, you don't need to paint on this. You can't paint on this guy. So that's why you've got that slash on there. Okay. So the easy way, or not the easy way, the down and dirty way of doing this to do the shadows on the bottom goes like this. So you need to actually put a layer between the trees and the figure. Now, I've seen people try to do shadows above the figure. If you try to do shadows above the figure, the problem that you run into is you've got to mask them off. But if you do your shadows on a layer but on top of the trees but underneath the girl, you never have to worry about the masking the shadows around her feet. It will actually be just fine. They'll go in exactly the way they're supposed to go. So that's what we're going to do in this. So I'm going to select my tree layer right here. I'm going to click on add layer. Just add a blank layer on top of that. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to change the blending mode to normal. Actually going to change the quality of my brush. I don't want a completely soft brush, but shadows tend to be softer. I'm going to start around 50%. We'll see what it looks like. I may have to go in and fix this a little bit more. We'll check out and see what it ultimately looks like. I'm going to zoom in on this image here closer. And when I go to paint shadows, the thing that most people say is, oh, you should just start with black. You really shouldn't start with black. You should start with a shadow color if you can find one. And I'm looking at the rocks that are right back here. There is a color back there that is definitely a shadow. So I'm going to hold down my Option key, and I'm going to click on that to sample it. And if you simply then click on this to open it up, you'll see that the shadow color that I picked, it's actually got some red in it. It's got very little blue in it, and the green is sort of the middle player in this. So it's not a pure black. It's actually based, my shadow is based on that color. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm going to simply start to work right underneath her shoe right now. And again, because this layer is underneath the girl, as I do this, you will only see the shadow covering the wood, the fern and all that kind of shit back there. So I'm simply going to come down here and I'm going to paint out like that to kick in a shadow. There would be a small one that actually happens back here as well. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller and hit back in here like that. That seems too sharp for me, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to make my brush completely soft now. And then I'm going to hit this guy down here just a little bit. That seems a little bit better to me. I'm going to hit that just a little bit more. I'm going to come on my other side over here, and I'm actually going to do the same trick over in here. I'm just going to sort of paint underneath like that. Then I'm going to double click on the hand and kick back out. And now you can actually see. Now, in my opinion, I think these shadows are too strong. But this begins to anchor her to this background. To reduce the strength of the shadows, simply make sure that the shadow layers is selected and simply drop its opacity until you feel like this thing is actually working correctly for you. And that feels a little bit better. Again, this is not the ideal way to do it, but it is the down and dirty way to do it. If you feel like your shadow is making a mistake, that it's in a wrong area, that there's something wrong about it, you can always add a layer mask to this so that if you're seeing something that you feel like is off, you can actually, so for instance, if I don't like the shape of it in a certain place, I can go in and use this mask to sort of refine and sort of see where it's supposed to be. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? Okay, I got 2:30. If you can be back at 2:45, we'll be in good shape.